This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland one of the lane, lob to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. It feels so good to be podcasting again after some wins. Somehow, in a 6-loss season to this point, we have podcasted 2 straight post games after a loss. That just feels impossible. The numbers don't add up, but it feels good to be winning. Congratulations to all you Ohio State Buckeye fans out there, keeping the winning going. When it's good for Ohio, it's good for the world. And what's good for me is podcasting with my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I think it's been 3 losses we've podcasted after, for a twice weekly. No, just 3 total. I think we did after one of the Boston losses as well. Though I think we dodged. I think we dodged Miami, and I think we dodged the 2 Atlanta L's.
Yeah. Those were weekend ones. That was helpful.
Yeah, it was weird. It was weird, like looking at the pod, looking at most recent pods, and it was 2 losses in a row, because it is not reflective of the season, and clearly it's not reflective of this team. They get punched in the mouth in a pretty meaningful way in that game against OKC. Like, run off the floor, all limitations. All the stuff that you worry about, how they handle ball pressure, et cetera, all that stuff happens. They also come off that ugly loss to Indiana where the same stuff kind of bothered them, and you go play a tough defense in Minnesota when your offense has been able to get knocked off its axis a little bit the last couple games. Mm-hmm. Then you go play an elite offense when your defense has been not up to snuff. Again, I think I had said 23rd in their last 10 games. And they score with relative ease on many, and they put the clamps on Phoenix. And I felt like it was just a great response.
It was 2 consecutive really good defensive performances when, we kind of ended the last podcast discussing, hey, do you have a little bit of concern? And I'm sure we'll get into, that a little bit more this podcast, but 2 really good defensive performances against teams that have been playing pretty well. Minnesota has been playing a lot better as of late. They were 15th coming into that game offensively, playing the Cavs. That's going to knock you down a little bit when they are trying on the defensive end. Phoenix Suns, 9th. Coming into that game in offensive rating. And in addition to that, they were 19-7 in games with both Kevin Durant and Devin Booker playing. You come through those 2 games with a combined defensive rating of 107.2. That's great. Know what makes that even more impressive? When you're missing your best defensive player in Evan Mobley.
And your second best defensive player, or third best, depending on how you rank Isaac Okoro in with that group.
Best perimeter defender.
Yeah,
let's just say that. Yeah, your best overall and your best perimeter defender were out, and that's important, especially when you talk about going against longer wings, right? Like, that's one of the concerns is who's going to defend the Kevin Durants of the world. Even Anthony Edwards, he's 6'4", but he's got a lot of length. Devin Booker is, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown size as well. So having very good defensive performances against both of those teams is encouraging. And what I really like, not only did they step up in games with Evan Mobley out, it's not like this was an instance of, well, they missed some open shots. They shot poorly from 3, and that's why it looks so good. The Suns shot 38% from 3. The Wolves shot 39% from 3. So on nights where you are having both of your opponents shoot very well from deep, you are still able to put forward a very good defensive performance overall and hold them to such a low output. I just thought it was a very, very strong response in an area that, we've had our eye on as of late.
Can I pause real quick to ask, can you show off that T-shirt to the listeners? Because I love it. Is this a debut?
This is a pod debut for it, yes.
Oh wow, that's an amazing shirt. Sorry, sorry for the audio listeners, but I had to indulge because it gets cropped on the 2-box. But I was looking at my preview window, I was like, oh man, that's a wonderful shirt.
It's the little blue man on my way to let them know shirt, which, the Cavs absolutely did in these 2 games.
Yeah, they did. And again, it just goes back to like, you wanted to see an answer. You wanted. It's funny, like I always tease people for having the memory of fish, but I have the memory of a fish, and like this, even no matter how good things are going, when we hit 2-3 speed bumps in a row, or like it, we get on unsteady ground, I do just have this internal, I try not to externalize it too much, this internal angst of like, maybe we're in for a rough stretch here. And it's been really cool to see this team so consistently be like, no, no, we're fine.
It is really nice, right? Like we've still gone through the season without a losing streak to this point. They've managed to respond when they've lost games. They haven't let it get to, that 3 to 5 game losing streak that can really cause you to lose ground in the standings. And I think that's really impressive. But I get where you're coming from, man. Like I'm paranoid as a fan, right? Like if anything starts to go bad, it's was it all fraudulent all along? If I mess up an ad read, I feel like I've lost my ability as a podcaster, and it's all going to go to hell. Like this is part of the experience of being, a fan of teams that have gone through some tough times, right? And especially when so much of this year has been about changing outside perceptions, right? Like let's show them what this core can do, that they can be elite on both ends of the court, that they can compete against the best teams in the league. Any kind of slippage there is going to crack open the door. I won't go too far into a certain podcast comparing the OKC game to the night Linsanity ended. But, there were people that were really reveling in things going off the rails for the Cavs on one night.
And the reality is it's going to happen, right? You are still cementing yourself as a true blue contender within the national conversation. Yep. Boston's allowed to get blown out in games because they won the title last year. So, people are less inclined to be like, nah, they're not real. Because, like, we just saw them be all the way real, the realest you can be. So, like, now, do I think the Thunder should be getting that much grace? No. I think the Thunder should have similar levels of scrutiny as the Cavs, based on how far they've gone in the playoffs. But, like, the reality is they have the benefit of that, like, MVP frontrunner in the narrative. So I just think
they also have the benefit of not needing to go through the defending champs to get there. Like, you look at how many teams in the Western Conference have a winning record, and there's a lot of them. But if you're really looking at after OKC, it gets shaky fast, right? Like Dallas, because they went to the finals, is going to get some benefit of the doubt. And, Lucas missed some time. But behind them is Houston. Like, Houston's a very great story, and kind of reminds me
but they're new.
Of they remind me of the Cavs a couple of years ago, where as good as their regular season's going to be, they're probably going to have some hiccups in the playoffs before they go much further. Denver's trying to round out their team. Like, there isn't even, like, it's not like the Eastern Conference where, okay, you very clearly have Cleveland and Boston up at the top. Most people kind of have the Knicks still in that kind of contending
tier of their own.
On kind of the fringes of it. But I would say that the Knicks would probably be a tier above. Like, if you moved them in the Western Conference, they'd be a clear number 2 above teams like Houston and whatnot. So I do think that is working in OKC's favor as well, because there isn't, that obstacle into just make the NBA Finals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. I get it. I think people are going to have a loud reaction to getting spanked on national TV. It's one of the downsides of being back in the national picture. I mean, how many times during the second LeBron era did we see the team that, that team certainly didn't take the regular season terribly seriously. And how many national games did they no-show and have people having those kind of conversations? What's wrong? Are they for real? Do they need to make changes? So, like, as annoying as it is to see the big overreactions, like, I do kind of like, this is what we asked for. We asked to matter again. We asked to be in the conversations, and this is part of that. When you get your teeth kicked in a big, high-profile game, these are the kind of conversations that happen to every team, maybe except the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if I'm being honest, and this is a toxic trait of myself, I look for things to get mad about after wins.
You do.
I was certainly looking. I was enjoying it. I was trying to find out, okay, who now is getting off the bandwagon? Who apologized on being wrong about this team before is reverting back to their old opinions, so I can once again shove it in their faces.
You get too worked up, my friend.
I do, but that's what fuels me. The nobody believes in us. I got to find those press clippings. I'm people compare me to Michael Jordan very often, but this is another one of those instances where I get compared to Mike because I'm going to manufacture the disrespect. I'm going to manufacture
you took that
the
personally.
nobody believes us. I really did, and I think that's what makes me so great.
Yeah.
But it was really nice to see them respond. And we talked about them responding with 2 strong defensive performances after that had looked shaky. But I think the other incredibly encouraging part of this was Donovan Mitchell looked great, right? That was our other kind of angsty topic after the OKC loss is something going on? Is this just...
he had a rough start to the calendar year.
Right. Is this a shooting slump? Is this something more? And, he comes out with a very nice 69 points in 62 minutes between these 2 games, scores efficiently, over 30 in both games, outplays Anthony Edwards, outplays Devin Booker.
Gets the line a lot, by the way. 16 free throw attempts in the 2 games.
I think he has been going to the rim with enough frequency that is something that should normalize. I think, he's starting to get to the line a little bit more. I like seeing that. But I thought he was terrific, and not just as a scorer. This was the most assists that he's had in a 2-game span since Christmas. This was a very complete performance from Donovan Mitchell in both of these games. And it's addressing one of those things that, not that we had concern, but it was worth keeping an eye on, right? How long are these ruts going to go? Does it get better? Does it get worse?
Mitchell
does it stay consistent?
Donovan Mitchell doesn't have a lot of games where he goes 5 out of 6 games not scoring 20 points. It's pretty uncommon for him. So it's at the least noteworthy.
Yeah, totally. So for him to step up in kind of these marquee matchups, not necessarily that the Phoenix Suns and Minnesota Timberwolves are superstar powered teams that are at the top of the standings, but in these individual matchups where he's going up against another elite guard in Devin Booker and Anthony Edwards, for him to get the better of both of those matchups, I thought it was great. And what I love about it as well, which is one of my favorite things about our backcourt, is it did not take away from Darius at all. Darius was dominant in both games. Unfortunately, Phoenix was one of those games where the minutes were so effective that he didn't play the 4th quarter again. Just the way the rotation works, sometimes him and Jarrett don't get to check in at that 6-minute mark in the 4th quarter. That was one of those games. But he was terrific in both games as well, particularly against Minnesota. I thought he gave them lifts at timely times.
Yeah, I just feel like Darius has been... I think best player is an interesting conversation, but I'm not interested in having that right this second. I think he's probably been our most consistent player. Do you think that's fair to say? In terms of...
I think it's fair to say.
I just don't see a lot of, stinkers from him, or really that many explosions from him. It's I whether I feel like I'm noticing him like crazy, or he's just having a standard game. I look at the box score. It's somewhere between 16 and 24 points. It's somewhere between 5 and 8 assists, and it's efficient and it's controlled, and never more than 2 turnovers. And it just feels like I can really count on him to play Darius Garland basketball, maybe more than the statistical output. I just feel like he's playing the same kind of game every game.
Yeah, and I want to give some credit to the Dunked On guys, because I really like the way that they frame this. But when they were doing their midseason awards, they actually had 3 Cavaliers on all NBA teams, which, there's a national podcast giving the Cavs love. But they had Mobley and Garland on the 2nd team and Mitchell on the 3rd. And they basically said, we believe Donovan Mitchell is the best player on this team, which I would agree with. But Mobley and Garland have both kind of been more impactful, right? Garland's been that consistent driver of the offense. Mobley's been doing it on the defense. And something we've talked about quite a bit already throughout the season is them being able to do that, them being able to stretch their wings, has been because Donovan Mitchell has taken that step back from a leadership standpoint and said, I'm going to empower these guys. I'm going to let them do more throughout the regular season. And both of them have answered that bell. So I think he deserves a ton of credit for that. But I agree with you. I think Darius has been really consistent. And what I really like is, I think you're right, where it has been consistent where you haven't seen the super high end explosive nights. Part of that is if he has an explosive quarter, the Cavs usually put that other team away and you just don't get to play enough minutes. But what I really like is returning to where we were basically, 2001 through 2003, where every time he checked in, it just felt like the game was going to be back under control. That we were going to
21 to 23. It's like, what are you talking about?
2021 to 2023.
I was like, who was playing for us 2001 to 2003 that helped stabilize?
Oh God, man, I didn't even recognize that I did that, but you know what I mean. It just constantly feels like if the game is slipping at all, he helps get other guys going. He helps them find their footing within the offense, and
the rhythm just kicks right back in.
Yeah, and Donovan's done that with some explosive kind of stretches, but just the consistency with which it happens and the way that he gets everybody else involved. It's when he has the ball, the team's offense has momentum. The passing and the shooting all seems to be contagious.
Yeah, he's just the ultimate team player. Justin, did you watch his appearance on the Draymond Green podcast?
I have not had the time to get to it. It's been a busy couple days.
Let me tell you. First off, I know that listeners of this podcast are not going to be thrilled with being told to go listen to Draymond Green's podcast, and I fully understand that. It was an amazing appearance from DG. Some of the most insightful, honest stuff you'll get out of a podcast. He talked about his relationship with Donovan and how they had some what he termed as grown man conversations about how they needed to play together over the summer. He talked about his relationship with Kenny, and I'm telling you, the way he talked about Kenny was not like you talk about your coach. It was like you talk about a dear friend. It was really, really cool, really, really special. But the reason I bring it up, other than to say everyone should go listen to it because Darius was just really cool on it, and we just don't get that much prolonged access to him like that. But with all that said, one thing I thought was really interesting was Baron Davis, who co-hosts the podcast with Draymond, asked him about being on pace for a 50-40-90. And he is, by the way, just 2 missed shots. He's 2 shots short of 50% from the field. So we'll see if he can get there. But it was interesting to hear because, they were just like, hey, how are you doing it? How are you getting that kind of flow, scoring at a 50% rate as a point guard? And even then he's like, dude, it's just my bigs. They're so good that when they're near the hoop, the opposing big does not want to step to me because bigs don't like to let their man score, which is a funny thing to hear he and Draymond talk about. But Draymond pushes back and is like, listen, no one freezes me out better than you. You are one of the best, at the very last second while I'm trying to play possum as a defender to figure out if you're going to play the pass or play the shot. You are one of the best in the league at making me not know when to commit. And when I do commit, you still get the pass off at the last second. So that's why he's getting, that's why his finishing is so much better this year. It's not just the craft, it's as a finisher, it's the way he sets it up and the fact that his peers are like, yeah, dude, we can't guard you. We don't know what to do. Was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, the floater game that he has and the way that he's able to make people indecisive defensively on whether or not it's going to be the lob, it is such a unique weapon. And I think the synergy with the big men where both of them are such quick leapers, both of them can go up at the last minute and kind of read what DG is doing and keep that option available to them. It's a perfect partnership. They really do let Garland do his best work, just like Zoom AI Companion can help you, because only you can do your best work, Carter. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion. You're
Absolutely.
really going to make me listen to Draymond Green, aren't you?
I am. It was really, really good, man. There was only like 1 or 2 segments where I was like, Draymond, I don't care about this aside. You know, for the most part, he kept it pretty focused on Gigi. They had some great war stories about Kenny. DG talked about how when they're doing drills, Kenny is like a psycho and guards like he's playing, and then we'll go off to the side and work on his handle. I think the quote was, "It's like he's trying to go get a 10-day contract." So lovely to have an absolute basketball psycho in Kenny. And actually, Baron Davis played for Kenny Atkinson, too, for a brief time in New York, he said, I think, a long time ago. So
yeah.
All three had just amazing things to say about what it was like to play for him. And, you know, what a good balancer of analytics and understanding how players function. Like, it was just a really cool, nuanced conversation. So Gotta give credit where it's due. I know it's not the most popular place to do it.
All right, well let's mix some sugar with the vegetables you just served us there, Carter. I'm gonna open the floor to you just before we get back into some Cavs talk. What was it like watching your family win national championship there at Ohio State? Like we can't totally skip over this.
Oh yeah, well I mean, shouts to Jack Sawyer, Captain Jack. I don't know if you saw the College Game Day piece on that. The relationship he had with the kid who had terminal cancer, and you know, just what a you know, we're really proud of him. You know, I guess is all I'm saying. He is you know, he's always been a great kid. He's always been you know, I was the ring bearer at his mom's wedding. You know, and we just, you know, he did the shade side of the of my family very, very proud.
Hell yeah. I'm very, very happy for you. Happy for the family. Happy for all Buckeyes fans, man. Like I said, when good things happen for Ohio, it's good for us all. I want to get into the defense a little bit when it comes to the Cleveland Cavaliers, because we talked about, you know, how it's looked better these last 2 games. But I do think it's worth diving into a little bit more just to see where they're at overall for the season, what concerns we have. And I'm not totally positive even where to start on this, because we discussed it a little bit on the last podcast, where for me, I really do feel like it's something that the Cavs can flip the switch a little bit with. Like I think when they have been locked in a lot of these premier matchups, they have played very well defensively. I feel like there's enough track record here that I'm not necessarily worried about them. But I do also have to acknowledge, hey, there has been some stylistic changes to how they're playing. Where are you at on the Cavs defense?
Yeah, so I think it's weird, and this is why I wanted to talk about the defense on this episode, because I do think there's a bit of a perception versus reality thing, and there's also just the question of like, what matters? Does the number matter, or does where you are relative to the league matter? Because in a lot of spots, this defense isn't that different statistically, you know. But but even if they post the same number, last year they're like 6th, and this year they're 11th in some of these categories. And like, I don't know. Like, do you feel like the team's defense is as good as it was last year? Most of the numbers say it's pretty close, but there are certain vibes that make it feel like there's been some steps back. Certainly Kenny has been bothered at different points in the season about their commitment on that end of the floor. So like, before we dive into any numbers, do you feel like they've been as good on that end?
I guess on the whole, my answer would be yes. There did feel like times last year, like thinking back to seeing them over scramble on the perimeter, right? Where we talked about, hey, they're getting out of their defensive shell a little too often. They're sending too much help, and that's leading to some open opportunities. I don't feel that as much this year, but I do feel like there have been stretches where, you know, they're in zone and they're not as active in the zone as they are when it really looks good, right? Like I think back to that OKC win. They're in zone, but they're very aggressive. It's a attack orientated zone Whereas there's other times where, they're playing the Toronto Raptors, you go to it, and they're not moving around within it as well. So I feel like there's been kind of more lackadaisical moments when it comes to the defense. But on the whole, I do feel like, I still feel like they are who they are, right? Like they're still the best team when it comes to rim protection, number one in field goal percentage allowed at the rim. The 3-point frequency, they do a good job of kind of restricting those shots overall. They have the fourth lowest 3-point frequency in the league. That's great. Still
better than last year. Last year they were 8th.
That's a great sign.
Yeah, should we just do the number parade real quick? I do think it would be valuable just to do a quick number parade of like where they are this year on these key areas, where they were last year. Take us away on the number parade, Justin. I'll just kick my feet up.
Yeah, so the 3-point frequency in the corner, they're 23rd in frequency of shots allowed there, so that's not great. That's in line with where they were last year, 22nd. In terms of accuracy on those shots, it's 23rd, so that feels normal, right? 23rd in frequency, 23rd in accuracy, that correlates really well. As I mentioned before, they're 4th in overall frequency allowed from 3, 23rd in accuracy. So that's maybe somewhere where you might see that regress a little bit. I think we've seen the
positive regression in this instance.
Correct. We've seen the overall numbers in terms of how opponents shoot on those wide open threes come down quite a bit. I remember not too many weeks ago, we were talking about that at 45%. It's all the way down to 40%, right? Like those numbers are normalizing. So I see that continuing in the future. 16th in shot location effective field goal percentage. So this is basically if teams shot league average based on where you're allowing those shots, how good is that shot quality? So they're right middle of the pack. That's really nice to see. And, it's even better than OKC, who's 20th in that statistic. Boston, of kind of the contending teams that we keep an eye on, they're the best. They're 5th. New York's 19th. Milwaukee's 12th. So we're middle of the pack there. I feel very comfortable with that.
And one thing I'll say on that is, I don't think the Cavs would ever be first in a location metric like that, because they don't mind you shooting at the rim because you ain't gonna make it.
That's exactly part of it, right? Like we are deterring 3-point shots at one of the best rates in the league. And while we're very okay with you settling for a mid-range shot, we're also okay with you coming to the rim because we are going to defend those shots better than anybody. So I feel really comfortable with that. You look at the cleaning the glass stats, they've now fallen to 13th in defensive rating against top 10 offenses. Not a great sign, but also not that surprising when you're coming off that OKC game. That's going to skew the numbers quite a bit. Right. Like that's going to skew the numbers quite a bit. We know that we had also that Boston game earlier in the year where there are no wings. So that's something I'm at least going to keep an eye on. And 13th in half-court defense. That dropped a lot since those OKC games. That is definitely going to be one of those areas that I keep an eye on because that's when I'm looking at the numbers. That's one of the areas that I noticed some slippage, and I'm curious if that corrects over the rest of the year.
But this is where it gets really messy because right now they're 13th in points per possession in the half court. As you noted, they're allowing 96.7 points per 100 possessions in the half court. So you go, okay, we're like an average team. Last year, we were 4th last year. That's great. And like we must have really fallen off in the half court to fall from 4th to 13th. But they only gave up 96 last year. So it's a 0.7 point difference. That's like 57 points over the course of a season. Like, it's just not a meaningful difference. Now, again, that's why I kind of asked that question of relative to the league, because it does matter relative to the league. Because, like, the best defense in the league now would be like the worst defense in the mid 90s, but that doesn't mean they're bad defense. You know what I mean? Like it's just
offenses are less proficient this year. Like we have seen scoring come down quite a bit. As much as people talk about, nobody plays defense in the league and whatnot. I do think that defenses are adjusting to what teams are doing offensively. That was one of the things I heard in a recent interview with Boston. Missoula was saying, I think teams have kind of figured out what we're doing offensively, and we're going to have to adjust to that, right? Like we kind of took the league by storm for a year and a bit. Now teams are adjusting. They're playing us a little differently, and we're going to have to find ways to counter that.
Yeah. So I think I think generally the defense is about as good as it was last year. And last year it wasn't as good as it was the year before when we were the best defense in the league. So like I do think there's like to be gotten to heights on that end that just haven't been there, you know, and this team's been relatively healthy, you know. It's not like they're playing, you know, a ton of horrible defenders and Evan Mobley's missed 20 games. So like I will say with that adjustment for health, given how much time Evan missed last year, maybe they are playing just a little bit worse.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't know. I think they're a little bit worse. I think it gets a little bit skewed by the fact that they're playing so much faster. So that every score is higher. So you have a little bit of that. And also they're just exerting a lot of energy on the offensive end. They're moving, they're running. You know, maybe their floor balance gets a little messed up a little bit. But you know, I do feel like it's a nitpick amount of worse. Where I'm like, I don't think, to your wider point, I don't go into a playoff series being like, I don't know if we're gonna get stops, guys. Like I still think that defensive ceiling is there.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, I do think one of the factors that's worth noting is last year they did have a lot of Max Strus. When you look at defensive EPM, he was in the 94th percentile defensively. Obviously, you know, having Dean Wade in the starting lineup makes them a very good defense in those minutes as well. But, you know, there's been a bit of a drop off with that as well. Like his own individual defensive numbers are down just a little bit. Maybe that's a result of being asked to do so much more. But even then, it's not like he's playing an insane number of minutes. But, you know, that's at least something that you could potentially look at. But the only real structural change that I feel with the defense is, one, they're staying home more frequently, which I actually appreciate. I think that the defense, that is a change that I think is going to bear fruit.
That's
for the
a good playoff change.
I think that is going to matter when this team goes to the postseason. The other one is the zone, right? And we have seen that be successful. We have seen it be unsuccessful at times. And that's one of those defenses that I really do think it comes down to how aggressive you are in it. I think one of the reasons it's been so good for the Miami Heat is they have had pit bulls out there defensively, right? They are going to really pressure you within that zone, and it becomes, you know, a way that they attack you. You can't sit back in it, right? Like especially when you're playing with both Garland and Mitchell, their ability to cover ground and contest the shot just isn't going to be there at their height. Whereas when they're playing man-to-man defense, I think we've seen both of them do a very good job on defense where, yeah, we're going to stand our ground. We're going to disrupt your ability to get to your spots. And even if you have a length advantage over us, we're still going to make things hard enough for you defensively that we're still going to function as a very high level defense.
Yeah, the other change that you didn't mention that I do think is important is they have been switching so much. I mean, way more than they did last year. You know, but again, I think that's a playoff kind of choice, you know? So there might be some possessions where the switches get them out of sorts, you know, especially when only one big is on the floor and you're just not, your back line just isn't the way it needs to be, especially when Dean isn't out there as the 4. But like, yeah, man, I just think it's pretty much as good. Like, I think Darius is playing the best defense of his career. Donovan, I think, is, you know, there have been stretches where he's been really, really good this year, stretches where he's been just okay. You know, I think Merrill's defended better than he did last year.
He's done a very good job on that.
I think Niang has been better on defense than he was last year. So,
Agreed.
like, I just think, like...
Can I just interject quickly on
Go
Niang?
ahead.
I think people have overlooked that there's been a drop-off in athleticism when it comes to Kevin Durant just because he's still able to get his shot off versus anybody and he's able to shoot over just about anybody. But I really felt it, and this is not a disrespect to George because I thought George played 2 very good defensive games, but Kevin Durant could not get around George Niang on a lot of those possessions. He did a terrific job on him, and, you know, as someone that is coming back from an Achilles injury, I recognized it there where I'm like, the old KD used to just fly around the court, man.
Yeah, I mean, like, I just think the Cavs, yes, Niang competed very, very well on that end. I just thought the Cavs did a great job of baiting Phoenix into the worst versions of themselves, you know?
Yeah.
And like, talk about a great team to go zone against. It's just like, hey, you're trying to do everything by yourself. We're just gonna zone. And
Yeah.
Phoenix did not change once. That was a tough game to watch if you're a Suns fan.
Okay, yeah, if you're a Suns fan, I was enjoying the hell out of it. I've honestly, George has been playing really well this year. I've had a lot of fun with it, and when he does, lock in and has one of those successful possessions on defense, I am hooting and hollering on the couch. Like, it is so much fun because he is going to let the other guy know every single time. You are going to hear about it from George Niang. So that was a lot of fun for me. That was one of the highlights of the game. So I really needed to highlight that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought he was really good. I think George has just been much better this year. I don't know if it's a comfort level thing. I don't know if it's a coaching staff thing. I just feel like there's, he was a good inside the arc finisher last year, by the numbers, but it always felt a little off schedule. And just, it felt like a little bit of like, well, that's not what you're here for,
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like, for whatever reason, the offensive structure wasn't to his benefit, I guess. It felt like he had to work really hard to have good games. Whereas this year, it just feels like he is both the release valve when pressure comes and, can get these quick release corner threes off, or he is the straw that breaks the camel's back a lot of the time, where he is, trailing and hits the wing three, or runs the corner in the fast break, and and someone gets in the paint, is pop into the corner, and he hits the thing that takes the 12-point lead to 15. It just feels like everything's a little easier for him, and I don't know how much of that is George getting more comfortable and playing better, or the system just being maybe a little bit better suited to him.
I think it's all of the above, right? Like he's talked about how he put a lot of work in on his body and getting in better shape and whatnot. And I think that is a factor. And I think it's also just a factor of what context he's being put in. It reminds me a lot of Karis LeVert, where, they've reduced a lot of those kind of off schedule plays. And now when you see him drive, it makes sense, right? Like he's really hunting for the threes, but he is effective at attacking those closeouts and creating opportunities for himself and others. So I just think he's been put in a lot better context, and he's making the most of it. And to your point, like, he's shooting really well from three as well, right? Like 39%. Cavs actually have 8 players shooting above league average from three right now, and 2 of them aren't Sam Merrill and Dean Wade. Like, Dean is just below league average. But Strus, 37.2%. That's great. Niang's at 39. Okoro's at 40. Donovan, Karras, Mobley, Jerome, Garland, all above 40%. Like, they're shooting really well.
Yeah, and they have finally crossed that threshold under 40% as a team, which I actually think is A-okay. Like,
it's a good sign.
I've been of the opinion, of the people who are skeptical of this team. There's been a loud, the shooting's going to regress. The shooting's going to regress, and then they'll be more normal. And it's like, well, they're down to, they're less than a percentage point higher than the second place Milwaukee Bucks now, and they're still great. Like, because the reality is they didn't go from shoot. They didn't have a ton of crazy outlier games. Like, that's what I've always felt is even while they were shooting the cover off the ball, I felt like they would be between 40 and 44% every game. It was like they didn't have a lot of, 55% outings like you see sometimes in this league. They've been really steady in their output from three, even if the players themselves on a, week to week basis go up and down like they always do. So I never felt like a huge drop off was coming, and I didn't, and I think this team is built to be the best 3-point shooting team in the league. And they're showing that last year was the aberration, not this year.
Totally. And I think one of the encouraging things too is, as I'm listing off the guys that are leading the team in 3-point percentage, these are kind of the lower volume guys, right? Like Ty Jerome's not going to take a ton. Evan Mobley's not going to take a ton. Isaac Okoro's not going to take a ton. And someone like Sam Merrill, who's shooting below 34% from three, think that number is going to come up. It's frustrating that we only got one game of everybody being available in the rotation. Both Evan Mobley and Isaac Okoro have been ruled out for tomorrow's game against Houston. But this is another opportunity for Sam to go out there and get more shots up, try to find his rhythm, and hope that pays dividends down the road, because he's doing everything else out there that you'd want from him. It's just about getting those shots to fall again. And he's too good of a shooter to think that it isn't something that would normalize.
Yeah, that's fair. We're around the 40-minute mark of the pod, and I did want to make sure, because I didn't know if you had it in the rundown. We had about our boy Jalen Tyson getting some real run yesterday. And not loud, but really gave them good minutes on both sides of the ball. What did you see there?
I loved it. I thought he was doing annoying role player things, and I mean that in the most complimentary way. Possessions where he didn't get the offensive rebound, but because he was fighting for it, it went off a Suns player and became Cavs ball. I like that he's confidently taking threes out there. The activity is really good, and he's one of those players, and I've used this example many times, but it reminds me of TT when he was playing as a big, where the more talent he's playing with, the more he fills out the rotation, the more he fills out that lineup, because he's a glue guy. He's a guy that completes lineups. And Kenny said as much after the game. He said, these end of game situations aren't putting him in the best context. He's someone that looks better with more talent around him. And I couldn't have agreed more. I really, really like seeing it. And what's encouraging to me too is to see the possessions, not that there was tons of them, but the possessions where he still gets by NBA level defenders and he finishes well at the rim. Because I know athleticism has been one of those things that you're keeping an eye on. And I feel like whatever he lacks in athleticism, there's a sufficient amount of craft that makes me feel like, hey, there's something here. I still feel very comfortable and confident that he has the potential to become a quality role player for this team in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be angsty about it until I see it, in a more high volume role, just because athleticism matters in this league. Having vertical pop matters as a wing, because you go against freaks on the other side of the ball every game. So you have to compensate it for a lot of different ways. I think he's shown a little bit of that. I thought in general that game was just his best balance of, I'm gonna play Jalen Tyson basketball, and I'm going to be a complimentary player, because it's real. I mean, talk about a challenging situation for a guy who, for every other part of his basketball career, has been, a lead ball handler type, especially his last year at Cal, where he had one of the highest usage rates in the country. And so you go from that to either playing garbage time of unstructured basketball for the most part, where you're trying to you're trying to figure out how to just fit in and not be a jerk because it's garbage time. Or you're playing these 4 to 5 minute stretches once every 3 weeks, but you can't play like a wuss either, you can't play timid, afraid basketball, but if you're too aggressive, it's like, well, brother, we don't want you running pick and roll. You've got Darius and Donovan out there next to you. So it is I thought he did a great job towing that line, I guess is what I'm saying. Where he would catch an attack and run off of rebounds and find guys. He would shoot when he had a little bit of room. He would, jump passing lanes when it was appropriate. There were still a couple of possessions where the ball got swung to him and he had an advantage and he paused for a second. I think that's the kind of stuff he'll probably watch in tape with the player development team and be like, that was a spot where you don't want to short circuit there. But that's, I thought he had very few of those plays, and 15 minutes without a turnover for a very, very high turnover player in his college career through summer league, with
the charge.
Yeah. And even when he's had the ball a decent amount, He likes those ambitious passes that like you could get away with a little bit easier at a lower level that are just going to be pick sixes in this league. So I thought it was a very under control, but still bold and still loud in Jalen Tyson kind of ways performance. And I thought it was probably obviously he had that great near triple double against New Orleans when, against the zombie Pelicans. I think this was his best run as an NBA player so far in terms of what the Cavs are going to need him to be if he's going to be a rotation player down the line.
Yeah, against, a higher level of competition than what we saw in that Pels game for sure. I like seeing Craig Porter Jr. get some run out there. Honestly, I would encourage you guys to check out those charge games on these off nights with the Cavs. You can watch those games for free on YouTube. I've really enjoyed tapping into those. What I really like is it seems all the guys that are kind of in that program are long wings, long athletic wings. It's very clear what the Cavs are trying to develop there. And the other thing that I really enjoy is the three-point shot is the question for a lot of these guys, right? Like whether it's Craig Porter Jr., Jalen Tyson, obviously Amani Bates is going to
got his first NBA action of the season against Phoenix.
Yeah, but he's a guy that's going to earn his living behind the three-point arc. JT Thor, Luke Travers, all of these guys, you want to see them develop a consistent jump shot, and they are all taking it. Like Craig's out there, he's played 8 games with a charge. He's taking nearly 6 threes a game. Tyson gets them up. Travers gets them up. It's just really, really nice to see them play that way and kind of understand, okay, what's going to be that skill development that gets me to the next level. So fun to see Craig out there. I wish he didn't hesitate on that 3, but it was great to see him knock it down. And I liked his minutes overall.
By the way, really enjoying Cavs summer leaguer Naquan Tomlin's time with the Charge. What an interesting player, didn't play high school ball. I
love those development stories.
It's one of those things where like you watch the way he's playing for the Charge right now, and like, as you see a lot of teams cycle their two ways over, year over year over year. Yeah, if you were to say, like, what odds would you place on Tomlin getting a two-way deal with the Cavs? Like, I'd say pretty darn near even. I think he's got a really good shot, and clearly he's a guy that they were interested in. They brought him in for Summer League. They brought him onto the Charge, and like he's showing a lot for a pretty big project type of player at that level. He's springy. The jumper looks good. He's getting a lot of boards. Interesting player. That's all I'm saying. I know we're deep into myopia here, but
we are. But this is, hey, look, the chase down is for the sickos.
If you're 48 minutes in, come on, like
you are.
You're at least a little interested in Naquan Tomlin.
You are one of the sickos of the sickos, so we appreciate you sticking around here. I agree with you. I think this is one of those times where I totally agree where if I had to bet, I would say it's very, very likely. But we should also remind our listeners, we are not people that do journalism. We do not do reporting.
This is wild speculation.
We are excitable little boys. And when we see someone go out there that's very athletic, that has length, that shows the promise he does, we get very excited. And whether it's Summer League or whether it's the G League, I just got to see flashes, and I'm, I start salivating like a pit bull here. So very fun to see that. I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see these games against Houston. I wish the second one wasn't on the second night of a back-to-back. Houston only plays these 2 games against Cleveland, whereas we have to fly to Philadelphia and then fly back for the game against the second game against Houston. But I'm interested, man, because there has been a little bit of a narrative forming with the Cavs about, we fall apart anytime we play length, which I think is ridiculous. The Cavs have beaten a lot of really, really long teams,
including Minnesota just 3 nights ago.
Yeah, including, the Lakers, including Minnesota, who's, starting a 6'4" Anthony Edwards.
Including Orlando.
3 guys, including OKC, including, What I think the Cavs actually struggle against is ball pressure, particularly.
Well, you're going to run into that against Houston.
Exactly. And, Indy throwing ball pressure at them, OKC throwing it at them. I think that has made them uncomfortable at times, and I think it illustrates just what a high level Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell have to play at to kind of alleviate that. But you're losing kind of that release valve that you have in Evan Mobley, at least for this first matchup against Houston. I'm really interested to see how we do against the ball pressure there, because I think what actually gives them trouble is that pressure, at least at times, because, you know, I've seen people say the long length of Indiana really bothering them. No, 6'1" TJ McConnell and 6'0" Andrew Nembhard isn't the length that was bothering.
He's not 6'0". What are you talking about?
He's 6'1", isn't he?
No, he's like 6'4".
No way. Here, I'm gonna.
He's 6'4". I just pulled it up.
Nah, he's 6'1".
What are you talking about, bro? You are out of your mind.
That is the first time in this podcast history I've ever discounted a Canadian in any way, shape, or form. So
you are out of your mind. You're so worked up about the point that you're just inventing realities.
This 5'10" guard is not bothering Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland.
Thank goodness we're near the end, because that was embarrassing.
This 5'6"
his whole
guard,
thing is that he's a tall guard. Like, that's his brand.
5'4" guard isn't doing anything. No, it's the pressure, and Houston brings a lot of pressure. They have a lot of strength. They have a lot of length.
Thompson, Tari Eason, even Van Vliet. Like, these guys all like to play pit bull basketball.
Dylan Brooks, really physical player.
Like, so they like to get up into your chest. They like to turn you over. This is a team that's, like, with the exception of Şengün, just it's not a great half-court team. So, like, they need to get out and run. And they're going to do that by trying to turn you over.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to see how we handle that challenge, particularly without Evan Mobley in this first matchup. We've seen them play well against these types of teams. I think one of the examples that gets overlooked is Orlando, who is a very long and very pressure-filled defense that the Cavs did very well against as well. So I'm excited to see, you know, how we do in those matchups. And I just wanted to note that, because I've been annoyed at this notion that, you know, length just automatically means that the Cavs lose. We haven't lost enough games for that to be true. We have beat taller teams than the ones that we've lost to. And I really enjoyed, circling back to that podcast, I really did enjoy the sentence, Atlanta's beat the Cavs twice because they struggle with length. They beat Boston 3 times who don't struggle with length. Those were 2 sentences strung together back to back. Why don't they struggle with length? They lost to OKC and they haven't beat them, unlike us.
Well, you know, I'm sure you were worked up. You know, I'm sure it was frustrated to see 4'6" Dyson Daniels treated like a long wing. You know, come on, bro. It's okay, Justin. It's okay.
Andrew
Deep breaths.
Nembhard, I still love you. I want to see you do well.
Clearly not.
You know, honestly, I was making him out to be an even more impressive defender. I thought he was doing it despite the lack of size, and here he is, taller than I thought. Good for you, Andrew Nembhard.
A lot taller than you thought.
Hey, you know, 6 foot, 6'4". It's
man sits down in a defensive stance, and you think that's how tall he is, Justin. I don't know, man.
He was shrinking before my very eyes, Carter. Unlike our undying support from you guys, the audience, we really love you guys. Thank you so much for sticking around this late and listening to us be dummies. Really appreciate you guys. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of the Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send me a screenshot of that review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.